Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 63. We're currently rolling into the idea of the Mesmer Elite Specialization for the new X-Pack. I've already got a ton of comments from you guys. We're going to dive into that big time tomorrow. For now, we've got some interim stuff, and yeah, if at any point, I mean, a lot of the questions that I've gathered today probably aren't going to make you think of the Mesmer at all, to be honest. But if any of you do think of the Mesmer as it goes along, please drop your thoughts, and I'll be pulling from them tomorrow. In the meantime, first we've got Captain Ray, who, and by the way, when I say there's miscellaneous comments today, they really are very miscellaneous. Captain Ray said the game looked beautiful in this video. Is this like a post-processing thing being used? No, actually, that's just, yesterday was one of the very, very rare times in which I've shown you max graphics as of the most like recent 40 parts. And particularly, I'm guessing what motivated this comment was just the very start of the footage on yesterday's part, where I was in that central area of the desert borderlands. I've taken to spending a lot of time there now because outnumbered pips seem to get easier there as long as you're not the server on defense. We were obviously talking about the central regions of the desert borderlands in one of these videos, as that was kind of a big mechanic there that got cut away, and if there's in End of Dragons going to be a new borderlands, maybe they'll go for something similar. Anyway, it struck me just how gorgeous that place looks when you have everything set up, and that's kind of why I showed it, because I think it's a particularly beautiful area. The desert borderlands in general just look great. There's kind of that sandy, sort of blown sand effect that they have in some places as well that just looks so amazing. It's little stuff like that that I think it's really hard to nail down and say, this is why this area of the game was so good, or why this expansion was so good, because sometimes they just really knock it out of the park with something artistic, but it's small and weird and hard to sort of pin down why it looks so good. Stuff like that, though, continuing on with End of Dragons, obviously, I'm excited by. Even though it's a game that came out in 2012, I think they can push it in a lot of fun ways. Next, we got Alexis, who said, as I recall, the reason originally given for making auto loot a mastery was to avoid making things easier for bot accounts. So yesterday Boots was on, we ended up talking about masteries, what we want of End of Dragons, and I pointed out that I really don't like auto loot as a mastery. To me, that's just an option. And yes, this is true, I never mentioned it yesterday, but they were careful about auto loot because of bots, and if you put it on the mastery system, you're at least saying to the bot account, okay, you need to get to level 80, and then once you're at level 80, you need to acquire the mastery points themselves. Maybe they didn't come in for free. You know, maybe you didn't explore in the perimeters of the game and grab them. Remember, the mastery points you actually have to specifically go out of your way for. And then work your way through the whole tree until finally you've got it. And I think as far as like avoiding bot accounts being able to have it easily, that was an elegant enough solution. But I still argue that didn't have to be a mastery. All those gates and checks and balances pretty much could have been in place, even if it just existed as a regular option. You know, maybe it's a grayed out option. You mouse over it and it tells you the prerequisites, and then you do them, and then you can activate the checkbox. I really feel like mastery should be something visual, something with an animation, something physical that your character is doing, and something I can imagine my character doing. The idea of auto looting, my character's doing that, it's not like there's nothing immersive or tangible about it that somehow puts me off. And again, I know that that's just kind of my opinion. Some of you guys might really like the reward-based masteries, and we might see they do that really hardcore in End of Dragons. But stuff like that, software stuff, I don't want to see in the system. I wish I could say that it's contaminating it, but I mean, that's a Corteria mastery. It's been there since almost day one, right? It's kind of par for the course, and the devs might do more like it for sure. Next, we've got Daiji, who said, hey, WP, starting May 5th, Guild Wars 2 will actually have a new end-user license agreement. I found mine in the login screen. Please check it out. It contains a lot of stuff, including media streaming from different mediums. So I haven't actually looked into this. I heard that it was happening, and some people were looking to see about third-party software. We were talking about the graphics a second ago, and obviously one of the things I'm really excited to do when End of Dragons comes out is make the videos look as good as possible. And I do know that kind of a new version of Guild Wars 2 Hook, which is kind of a Guild Wars 2 specific reshade, is being worked on by some people. I'm really excited to see what they can do, and I've like slowly been gathering information. I'm really looking forward to making a video on it. But now I'm a bit scared that with the end user license agreement, the devs are going to change things. Apparently it's still a bit vague and a little bit waffly. I mean, what else do we really have to worry about? Maybe me as a content creator, I've got to look into it because, you know, maybe they're careful about what I can stream and what videos I can show and how I use their trailers and stuff. I've always complimented ArenaNet for one big thing, and that's that they've always been very happy to have their music on any videos and their trailers on any videos. I've never been copyright struck by any of that stuff. Except I think maybe once, which was a false flag from NCSoft rather than anything else. So yeah, hopefully there's no big changes. You guys can fill me in down below because I am out of the loop on this particular topic here. Next comment here is really about the series rather than End of Dragons itself, but they're saying, Unit Chrome, this music is so X-rated shady. Please stop, your videos are blending into the thousands of rubbish videos on YouTube that use that generic right-free music. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. I won't have it on this video. I've had a few of you guys say you want to hear the Guild Wars soundtrack and stuff in the background again. I'm not 100% settled on the lo-fi thing. I'm just kind of trying it over a few episodes, and I feel like it's better than just spamming Dust Force all the time. But you're right, I kind of agree with some of your criticisms here. I'd rather feel a little bit more individual and particular. So again, on Discord, guys, I do have a feedback channel for all this kind of stuff. If you've got an idea for music that you think would really complement this and would be a nice shake-up from what we've been doing, go ahead. I mean, the other side of it is, though, that Guild Wars 2 has so much music. The playlist I built is like hours long, I think. And you shouldn't be hearing the same section over and over and over again. Sean Collins says, the map discussion raises a good point. So this was Boots and I guessing at where the maps might be overlaid with the continent. Assuming we're doing rectangle maps to maximize space, if a map is only going to be, say, 50% of what the engine can handle, why does it have to be a rectangle? Maybe there's some very old constraint on the engine that it has to be a rectangle. Also, when are we going to go next door to Lion's Arch? Well, I actually think you've got a really good point here, and they don't have to be. In fact, this is one of those like weird little niggly things that I nonetheless would appreciate End of Dragons moving away from a lot. If they are going to do slightly smaller maps because there's slightly less pressure on mount traversal, you know, maybe because they are denser maps, so to speak. Yeah, they can have wonkier boundaries. There are some examples of maps in Guild Wars 2 already that have these kind of wonky boundaries, for what it's worth. Like, think about Thunderhead. Thunderhead isn't really a rectangle map in any sense. Draconis Mons, I would say as well, isn't really a rectangle map. Some of the vanilla rectangles are kind of shaped well enough that you don't really get a sense for it anyway. Like, Lornar's Pass is a very long, thin rectangle. Some of the maps they drop in are just like little squares, really, right? So they can play around with it. I think that would be a nice touch for Cantha. In a lot of ways, we're really talking about something kind of superficial, I think, and that's how the map art works and is overlaid together. And I think the devs often just think about that really late, and they don't actually care that much about respecting the map art. To me, that's actually a big immersive point of the game. But look at like when Bitterfrost Frontier got added. They closed off the supposed water route that all the water had to get into Frostgorge Sound, which really made very little sense. Look at South Sun that I've talked about a lot of times. And actually, funnily enough, we mentioned the Desert Borderlands a second ago. One thing I've always kind of disliked is how they just plopped the Desert Borderlands onto the map of the Mists. You know, it's funny, we've been talking about the maps a lot in the past 2 videos. One map I very rarely actually pay enough attention to is when you're in the heart of the Mists and you press M, you see this whole massive world where all the different PvP maps get dropped onto and the world versus world maps. And you'll see that when it came to the Desert Borderlands, they just kind of plonked it in the middle of what should be a mountain range, and they never tried to tidy up those borders in the art at all. Maybe it's because they always knew they wanted to do a third Borderlands eventually, and only at that point, when you wouldn't have duplicate Alpines, they figured they'd clean it up, because it's always going to look weird as long as there's 2 identical Alpines out there, right? So just as long as they're cautious, I think it's fine, and it doesn't really matter what the actual playable space itself is. Like, nobody ever thinks about the fact that the Hall of Chains is a rectangle map, because it's kind of like in a separate dimension, so you're not thinking about that fact. Or, you know, the Mystic Forge raid, the Mithrite Gambit, and so on. The Hidden City of Adashim doesn't look like a rectangle because there's only certain chambers you enter, and those are the only ones that kind of got painted in on the world map as that occurs. Of course, the other big exciting, truly the exciting question I think about the End of Dragons world map is whether they will append it to the existing Tyria, or they'll just accept it so far away, down south, beyond an ocean, that it gets its own little screen, as they did in Guild Wars 1. I'm hoping for the appending option, because when they do that, they might expand a ton more to the east, to the west. We'll get, you know, all of the Istan areas will be there. The Battle Isles will be on there. Maybe we'll even get to see some of these Dermond Priory floor texture, like the Sunken Islands and stuff. Imagine that. Imagine when End of Dragons comes out, we're in a new era of Guild Wars 2, where it's all about stories in distant lands, and immediately, right with the start of End of Dragons, the world map is just this epic size, and you can mouse over and see the Sunken Islands and these other places. That would be so cool. Kind of depends what the studio's ambitions are, though, right? Next, Leos OS says an interesting take would be that Cantha has been completely untouched by the dragons because of Shiro, and he's now seen as a hero of the Canthans. Morgemoth couldn't infiltrate the forest because it's been turned to stone. The Sea Dragon couldn't infiltrate the Jade Sea. Zaitan did not have any corpses to exploit because of the Afflicted. I admit it doesn't really work for Primordus, Kraukatoric, and Jormag, but maybe they just lucked out there because of geography. I think lucking out because of geography is actually a very valid thing to say for a lot of these Elder Dragons, as long as the story is that it's really these 6 and we're going to be dealing with them, and that's that. I like this idea. I like it as well, particularly because of the whole xenophobia and isolationism and kind of antagonistic ideas there are behind the Ministry of Purity. Like, they're kind of being set up as villains in Guild Wars 1. And so the idea that they actually have come to worship this guy that terrorized the region is kind of another reason to dislike them, that maybe they could pair up with the whole thing. And if the devs really hashed it out, they could even work out a bit of god lore in there. And how, you know, Dwayna, the harvest ceremony bringing life, she was really always doing something to counteract dragon corruption or bring bounty or something. I've mentioned many times that if they basically reveal that the Jade Wind had something to do with dragon corruption all along, and you say that this petrification is dragon corruption, then this immediately works for all dragons, no questions asked. Primordus can't take the icy areas that Jormag takes. Maybe no one can take the petrified areas that the Jade Wind had caused, again, if they build this connection between dragons and the Jade Wind. Could lead in quite a few fun, weird directions at that point, especially what Kunavang makes of the whole situation. Next, we've got Pock, who has a response to my idea of 2 maps for the Jade Sea and 2 maps for Ekovald. And I said they should be 50-50 maps, and I think I explained it wrong yesterday, but here's what Pock says. 2 maps, half Ekovald, half Jade Sea, doesn't feel very likely. It would make the 2 maps way too similar. So what I actually meant, and it was a conversation with Boots, and I didn't want to linger on what was a minor point, but the idea was not each map is half sea, half forest. I meant you'd have an Ekovald forest map that also has a lot of the Maishang Hills in the north, for example, or some of the mountains out to the west of it. And then in the second Ekovald forest map, it would be half forest again, and the other half is some of the other neighboring regions, the southern mountains, or, you know, even undisclosed places that we have never visited before. Same with the Jade Sea. We get half of the Jade Sea and also new territories out on the east with kind of a certain biome there. And then the second Jade Sea map is 50% another bordering area. And yeah, maybe you can have an area where both of the two collide. I do think that should be explorable somewhere in End of Dragons, because it's not just each individual region. It's the beauty of seeing the two places clash, and that was what was so cool about the Harvest Temple and the Unwaking Waters mission. So I want to see some kind of border territory, you know, in terms of the geography, not just necessarily what the Luxon zone versus what the Kurzik zone, if they're even being territorial at this point. But that's really what I meant with my idea. I think it would work because it would be a lot of variety. Duncan says, I like the idea of new mounts that are only available as rentals or somehow limited in their use. This might be a way to implement something bigger, more ambitious turtle designs, for example. Could tie them to the masteries and have them be very strong combat mounts that excel in specific areas. So we've talked a little bit about the rental idea before. I think it's a fantastic solution to the whole mount issue or dilemma, if you will. I can very easily imagine a renowned heart somewhere out in Cantha. Maybe you're in the slums of Kaineng somewhere. You beat the renowned heart, and this person now says, okay, cool, here, you can rent this creature from me and come back tomorrow. You beat the renowned heart and you can rent. There's any number of ways they can do it. I'm not saying they have to tie it to dailies. But your comment here I kind of wanted to pull up on, because I think you've touched on something else that the expansion could go gung-ho on. I've said multiple times, I don't really think they can go really big on anything unless it's like the new race idea. Well, I do think maybe a big signature moment and feature for End of Dragons could be mounts again. And you might say, well, hold on, how much space do they have for that? But what if the idea was, previously they were all explorative mounts and environment-oriented mounts? What if this next phase is the expansion will have like 3 or 4 of them, but they're all designed to be combat mounts of some variety, of some description. Maybe only during certain phases of combat you're getting on it and you're doing stuff, because obviously it's a delicate balance. You don't want the mounted combat to completely replace and eclipse all the other combat. You don't want to lose the meaning behind elite specializations and all that other stuff and all the rich and awesome buildcrafts that's already in Guild Wars. So you do need to play that game and that seesaw, but maybe you can play with that in a lot of fun ways. And even the old mounts, for people who have gone through Path of Fire as well as End of Dragons, because we can assume that the audience is going to have both, right? The people who get the old mounts get maybe an extra combat skill or something, so they don't just have to use the disengage, which kind of already is a mounted combat skill. It's just it immediately kicks you off. Maybe you've got another choice in there somehow. What's got me curious about the whole idea is it does seem to me that it's an obvious place to go with mounts, and the devs almost conspicuously haven't touched it even in the remotest little way during the Path of Fire era. So it feels like it's a big thing that they could, you know, really orient a lot of the End of Dragon stuff around. I think when we were talking about the Ranger, somebody proposed the idea of a Cavalier elite spec for the Ranger. And I like that too, but it's like just one profession gets such a big, such a cool, massive idea. I think maybe it should be broader than that. Another thing as well, going mounts again as another expansion, you might say that's like boring to people because last expansion was the mount one, but I actually think there'd be a lot of positive momentum and goodwill from that. Like, imagine a very casual Guild Wars 2 player who might be interested in the expansion. They hear that ArenaNet are going to do a big thing with combat mounts, and they might think, oh, is that going to be good? And immediately they're going to get hit with this brick wall of sentiment from everyone who's already in the community saying, wow, well, they did amazing with the POF ones. They're the best mounts you can find in any MMO. They're really good. I'm super excited to see how this studio can push it even further. So you might find that it actually really works to their favor. Or this is a completely wild idea that they're just not interested in it at all. It really does come down to that game of, can you do this without eclipsing the old combat? And that's a careful tightrope to walk. Kalakai says, do you think we'll see another cute, fun, silly creature in End of Dragons? I'm thinking of something like the Choya from the Path of Fire, or I guess the Quaggan from the base game. Oh, I definitely think that they should. I really got a sense from ArenaNet during the POF stuff that they were very proud of the Choya. I remember being at the studio and the first time while I was playing like one of these demos, killing one, and the devs are like, you know, very visibly keen to see the reaction of people who are seeing them split open and reveal that they've got watermelon on the inside. It's just such an inspired and cool, crazy thing. I think ArenaNet's really good at that sort of stuff, and I would like to see something for End of Dragons as well. I don't think you have to base it on old lore. I tweeted a picture a little while ago of some old Guild Wars 1 concept art that might fit, but I almost just want to say, you know, do something East Asian inspired, something that you feel like would fit in Cantha, and just have fun. And that's kind of what they did with Choya. They just this basic idea of a cactus, a juicy fruit that's sentient out there in the desert, and they made all these amazing varieties. I would trust their inspiration on that way more than my own, but I think it would be a big addition to the game. Well, so there you go, guys. That's End of Dragons Daily for today. Thanks very much for watching. Tomorrow will be all the Mesmer stuff, so please drop your messages down there. What kind of elite spec or mechanic or theme do you want for the Mesmer? And I'll promote some cool ideas, and I'll probably go big as well on the walls of text. I've seen so many of them, I'm going to be a little bit less shy about them on the next part. Thanks everybody who's still here continuing to support this show. I'll try and get more of a variety of Guild Wars 2 stuff coming out now that I can get my graphics a little bit better. Probably see the Tonic video soon. Until then, I'll see you next time.